Imagine the people living in the same city, or same neighborhood, similar apartments, maybe even on the same street. Completely different financial lives, hidden behind almost identical front doors. Person A's million Sharwand a year. From the outside, everything about their lives a success. The expensive car in a driveway, the luxury furniture, the latest technology sitting on every surface, the designer clothes, the vacations posted online every few months. Co-workers assume this is what winning looks like. Friends quietly compare themselves and come up short. But behind the scenes, a very different story is playing out. Credit card balances that never quite get paid down. No real emergency fund. A law, constant human financial pressure that never fully goes away, even on a good month. One missed paycheck, one unexpected repair bill, and the whole structure starts to shake. Person B earns half that. Lives simply, owns fewer things, drives an older car, hasn't redecorated in years. Nobody's particularly impressed walking past their apartment, but they have 6 months of expenses sitting untouched in savings. Consistent investments running quietly in the background month after month. And something persona doesn't have at any income level. No financial anxiety. They sleep fine. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. The person earning less may actually be the wealthier one. Because wealth was never really about what other people can see when they walk past you. Wealth is about how much freedom your money actually gets you when nobody's watching. Most people spend their entire lives trying to look rich. Wealthy people spend this trying to become free, and those two projects, despite looking similar from a distance, pull in almost opposite directions. Today, we're going through 10 hidden rules that separate the two paths. The quiet habits that build lasting wealth over decades, versus the louder ones that only ever build an expensive-looking life. Let's start with the biggest myth of all. The one almost nobody questions, until it's too late. That higher income creates wealth. Someone making $100,000 a year can still be financially fragile. Genuinely, dangerously fragile. Linguistic would surprise anyone looking at their salary from the outside. Because income is temporary, though it can be reduced. The lead were eliminated entirely with very little warning. Lead style, once it's set, tends to be permanent. It doesn't shrink back down nearly as easily as a girl. And here's what happens almost every single time income rises. Almost like clockwork, people immediately upgrade. A bigger house, a better car, a handful of more expensive habits, added one at a time, each one feeling perfectly reasonable and even added in a moment. Income goes up, but financial freedom, more often than not, does not. Wealthy people understand one simple equation that most people never actually bother to write down, let alone whereby income minus less there equals wealth creation. Not income equals wealth. Those are two completely different ideas. And confusing is arguably the single most common financial mistake there is, cutting across every income bracket. Someone earning $80,000 and consistently saving 30% that will, over time, often build more real wealth than someone earning $200,000 and spending every dollar that comes in. The question was never really how much do you make. The better question, the one almost nobody asks out loud at dinner parties, is how much of what you make actually stays with you at the end of the year. That brings us to the first rule. And it's one most people had genuinely never set their honor and thought through. Everything you own has two costs. The purchase price is only the first one. And honestly the easiest one to say. Every single possession you bring into your life also creates a second, much quieter cost. Maintenance, storage, attention, and opportunity cost, all compounding silently in the background. A $50,000 car isn't really a $50,000 expense once you actually add it up. It's Mayo 1 plus insurance, plus routine maintenance, plus the repairs that inevitably show up, plus depreciation quietly eating away the value every single year you own it. And this pattern doesn't just apply to big-ticket purchases. A house full of unused items isn't free just because it's already been paid for. Those things are still quietly consuming your space, your time, and the surprising amount of your mental energy every single day, whether you're actively thinking about them or not. Wealthy people learn to ask a different question before they buy anything at all. Not can I afford the price today, but how much would this actually cost me after I earn it, for as long as I earn it? Every possession is a silent financial commitment. whether you remember signing up for it or not. The second rule is a little more uncomfortable than the first, because it's really about identity rather than merit. Stop buying the person you want to become. Someone buys expensive gym equipment, not because they genuinely love fitness, but because owning the equipment lets them imagine becoming disciplined, styling tomorrow, or maybe next Monday. Someone buys expensive camera gear because owning lets them imagine becoming a photographer, even though the closest they come to a real project is a folder of unedited vacation photos. Someone buys a tool stack of books they'll likely never finish, because only then lets them feel like a serious learner without doing any actual learning. Here's the problem underneath of 3 examples. Buying tools doesn't create identity. Action creates identity. Slowly, unglamorously, and usually without any purchase involved at all. Wealthy, successful people tend to reverse this entire process. They build the habit first, in whatever small and unimpressive form it takes. And only once the habit has proven itself over weeks or months do they buy the equipment that supports it. They're not purchasing a future version of themselves on credit, hoping the purchase would drag the identity along behind it. They're investing, deliberately, in a version of themselves that already exists today. The third rule is about a trap that's almost invisible, precisely because it feels so completely ordinary. Never a great all of a boom. Your phone still works perfectly fine, but a new model appears in every aisle you scroll past. Your car still runs exactly the way it should, but a newer, slicker version arrives at the dealership down the street. Your furniture still does its job just as well at the day you bought it, but the trends have quietly shifted underneath you. And suddenly, without anything actually breaking or feeling, working perfect with sus feel a little bit like not enough. Not because anything real changed about the object itself, but because an enormous amount of money was spent each year, gradually and effectively. That new automatically means better. Wealthy people have learned it, often the hard way, to separate those ideas going away. New doesn't always mean valuable. They replace things when those things genuinely stop serving their purpose. Not the exact moment do these things stop feeling excelling when you. The fourth rule might be the single most important one on this entire list, the one quietly underneath most of the others. Define what enough means. Most people aren't poor because they earned a little. They're poor in the way that actually matters. The anxious never quite settle why. Because their definition of enough keeps moving further away, no matter how far or how fast they run to it. Someone earns million when. They earn million yuan. They earn million yuan. Now, somehow, they want million yuan. They earn $200,000. And instead feeling secure, they start comparing themselves to millionaires they follow online. The finish line never actually arrives, because it was never fixed in the first place. It was always going to keep sliding forward at exactly the same pace as their income. This is lifestyle inflation, and it's the quiet engine running underneath almost every case of buying genuinely good money. But somehow I'm still stressed about it every month. Wealthy people do something noticeably different, and it tends to happen much earlier than you would expect. They define enough before they ever become rich, no later. They decide, in advance and on their own terms, what kind of home is enough? What kind of car is enough? What kind of lifestyle actually creates happiness for them specifically, rather than for the people they're quietly comparing themselves to? Because if you never define enough for yourself, the world will happily define for you on its own schedule. And the world, through every era and every algorithm, always wants you to consume just a little bit more than you currently do. The fifth rule asks you to completely redefine what wealth even means in the first place. Wealth is not possessions, it is options. Most people measure wealth the way you'd expect, the way we're all trained to from a young age. Cars, houses, graves, the visible, photographable stuff. But real wealth was never actually about ownership, though it's about trust. Plan and simple. Can you leave a job that's been quietly draining you for years? Can you take real time off without immediately panicking about the bank account? Can you start something new? Something risky, without it threatening your family's ability? Can you actually show up and help your family financially when they genuinely need it, without it wrecking your own plans? Money only matters, in the end, because of the options equally creates behind the scenes. A person earning $300,000 but spending $290,000 has almost no real freedom at all. No matter how impressive the income numbers look printed on a resume or mentioned at a dinner party, a person earning may in proper and spending may instead of a week may, in practice, have far more control over their actual life than a person earning nearly 5 times as much. The purpose of money was never ownership. It's independence. Quite boring and worth far more than anything I could buy. The 6th rule explorers, how will the people actually manage to pull all of this off? Without relying on some kind of superhuman self-control, most of us simply don't have will systems, no willpower. Most people already know, deep down, that they should be saving more. They fail to do it anyway, not from a lack of knowledge, since almost everyone already knows the basic idea, but because they rely on emotion and good intentions instead of actual structure. I'll spend less next month, once things calm down. I'll start investing later, once I'm earning a bit more. But human behavior consistently follows the path of least resistance, not the path of best intentions. No matter how sincerely those intentions was felt in a moment, wealthy people design their environment around the reality instead of fighting against it every single day. Woodamalic investing, set up once and never revisited. Automatic savings transfers that happen before the money is ever visible in a checking account. Fewer spending triggers built into daily routines. Fewer shopping apps, fewer save card numbers, fewer one-click checkouts, a short waiting period built in before any non-essential purchase. They don't become wealthy by making perfect decisions every single day for 30 years stress. Realistically, nobody manages that, ever, without exception. They become wealthy because their environment quietly makes the good decision the easy decision, over and over, without requiring a fresh act of willpower each time. The 7th rule protects against one of the most expensive habits there is. The one that quietly fills garages and closets everywhere. Buying commitment before you've actually tested it. Rent before you own. Before buying anything significant. Test it first, worry it, rent it, even if it feels slightly inconvenient compared to just buying outright. Want a star cabin? Rent equipment for a weekend before committing to a garage full of gear you might use twice a year. Curious about photography? Borrow a decent camera from a friend before dropping several $1,000s on a setup you might genuinely use for exactly one trip. Thinking about picking up a new hobby? Try the cheapest possible version of it first, before investing heavily in the identity of being someone who does that. Most people, if they're being completely honest with themselves, own several expensive, slightly embarrassing reminders of interests they abandon within a few months of buying into them. Wealthy people protect their money by deliberately testing genuine, lasting commitment before they ever commit financially to something new. The 8th rule is less about earning more and more about protecting what's already been carefully built. Remove wildlife regularly, on purpose, as a habit rather than a one-time cleanup. Wealth isn't only built through addition, through races, bonuses, and small investments. It's just as often protected through subtraction, through quietly noticing and closing the small holes it will otherwise leak out of, and new subscriptions ruin themselves silently, month after month, for services nobody's opened in half a year. Unnecessary aggravation justified in the moment, each one perfectly reasonable on its own. Impulse purchases that felt small enough not to matter individually. Forgotten recurring expenses nobody's actually looked in over a year, quietly draining a little bit every single month. Here's what's easy to miss in all of this. Most serious financial damage doesn't come from one single catastrophic decision, the kind you remember making. It comes from thousands of small, forgettable ones, repeated quietly and almost invisibly for years at a time. Wealthy people building a regular, almost ritual habit of asking themselves one honest, slightly uncomfortable question: what is quietly taking money away from me right now, without my active permission? The 9th rule reframes the entire idea of what things actually cost, in a way that changes how almost every future purchase feels. Press tax lie. The real cost is time. When something costs $300, what it's actually asking of you isn't really $300 in the abstract. It's asking for however many hours of your one actual life it took to earn that $300. After taxes, after the commute, after everything that went into earning it in the first place. A $300 impulse purchase at a lot of ordinary jobs, politely represents close to a full working day as someone's life gone permanently, traded for something that might end up sitting untouched in a closet within a month or two. Worthy people have, often without even fully realizing it, trained themselves to automatically translate pressed tires into hours of life before they buy anything significant. Not because money doesn't matter to them, it clearly does, but because time is the one resource that nobody, at any income level, at any age, ever gets the chance to buy back once it's spent. And the 10th rule might be the least exciting item on this entire list, which, if you think about it for a moment, is exactly the point. Wilf loves boredom. There's nothing thrilling, nothing remotely Instagram-worthy about automatic transfers quietly happening in the background month after month for years on end. There's nothing exciting about the exact same Wallace investment, made consistently, without fanfare, for 15 years straight, with no single dream-alex story attached to any of us. Nobody is making a hollow reel out of "I didn't buy anything I didn't actually need this month," again, for the 40th month in a row. But that, quietly and ungrammatically, is precisely what real wealth looks like while it's actually being built. Repetitive, almost invisible from the outside, and completely lacking in any kind of story worth telling in a party. The people chasing excitement in their financial decisions are, more often than not, the same people re-explaining a decade later why is starting over from close to zero. The people quietly getting wealthy are, more often than not, doing something that would make for a genuinely terrible movie, and they've made peace with that trade. So here's where all 10 of these rules actually learned. Once you put them side by side, the person with the expensive lifestyle looks successful from every angle, in every photo, at every gathering. But underneath the surface, they own a long list of things that quietly create a pressure every single month, whether they consciously notice it or not. The person with fewer possessions owns something far more valuable, even though it never once showed up in a photo or a caption. Freedom, planned and unhampered. The goal, in the end, was never to collect more. It was to need less in order to actually feel secure. On an ordinary Tuesday, with nobody watching. Because the richest person in any given room isn't necessarily the one who owns the most impressive version of everything in it. The richest person is simply the one who can't be quietly controlled by money. In either direction, not the other way around. Your possessions should serve your life. Your life should never, slowly end without you quite noticing. Become a full-time job of maintaining your possessions.